Coming up, we talk what's going on with the Imagination Pavilion and the status of many Epcot Pavilion overhaul projects we've yet to hear much about. The rumored Space 220 restaurant opening month is just days away, and word is still silent from the venue on when exactly it'll open. And when in 2021 could the Guardians coaster open? All that and more on the way. This is the Magic Weekly, episode 147 for the week of January 30th, 2020. Hello everyone and welcome to the Magic Weekly, a weekly Disney questions and answers show covering all things Walt Disney World and beyond. This episode of the Magic Weekly is sponsored by DVCReservations.com. DVCReservations.com offers easy on-site rentals to all the Disney Vacation Club resorts at a steep discount to Disney rack rates. And if you're a DVC owner, there's never been a better time to list DVC points, making sure that none of your DVC contract gets wasted. With high demand, pricing, freedom, and a team that does all the work for you, DVCReservations.com is ready to make the magic for you. I'm your host, Braden, creator of Mickey Views, coming from the Mickey Views Magic Studio. Without further ado, let's jump right in. At the top of the show here, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the questions. Last show was awesome, got a lot of great feedback. It was a lot of fun to do, so let's keep it rolling. Our first question this week comes from Clifflix, who asks, any word on a possible Imagination Pavilion overhaul? Well, Cliff, last episode, I alluded to an Imagination Pavilion overhaul, and this got a lot of people wondering, what am I talking about? Am I talking about a new ride going in the Imagination Pavilion? Are they going to do something with Figment? What's going on there? And if we actually look at the abstract Epcot model, which is currently being displayed at the Epcot experience in the park, you can see everything on that model is part of the Epcot overhaul. And last episode, we talked about how the Epcot overhaul is going to go well past 2021. It's not all going to be done in time for the 50th anniversary. There's going to be stuff that's going to happen in 2023. There's going to be stuff that opens in 2024. This is all very likely. If we go off of the current overhaul plan, there'll be stuff that opens well into the 2020s, surpassing the 50th anniversary itself. There's a lot to do in Epcot, and everything in this model is something that Disney has some sort of plan for, where they want to do something with it. So looking at some of the things in this model, we have stuff like Test Track. We have stuff like Coco's guitar sitting on the Mexico Pavilion. So obviously they want to do something with Coco and the Mexico Pavilion. That's what that's saying, right? And you have the Seas Pavilion, which interestingly has its original mosaic from the original Living Seas Pavilion displayed on it as part of the projection mapping inside of the Epcot experience. And then of course you also have the Imagination Pavilion displayed on that model. So it is a fact. Disney is acknowledging that they do have some sort of plan as far as doing something with the pavilion and everything you see as part of the Epcot model. And here's where we run into a problem almost immediately. A lot of people have been asking me, Braden, when does the Imagination Pavilion get overhauled? How much is it going to cost? Are they going to put Inside Out in the Imagination Pavilion? Is Dreamfinder coming back? Is Figment going to be here? All this sort of stuff. The issue becomes, despite the fact that I've been saying how there's a lot of Epcot stuff in the works that goes past 2021, right now, as far as I know, according to my inside sources, the buck stops at Mary Poppins. Meaning anything after that project in Epcot, it does not have an Imagineering team, it has not been greenlit, it does not have a budget, it does not even have a concrete plan. Now, I'm someone who truly does believe that there's someone at Disney, likely in Imagineering, that has some sort of layout, some sort of long-term plan of where the parks are going. And I'm sure the executives are part of this as well, as far as what is the roadmap going forward long-term with the Walt Disney Company, with each individual park. I do believe that Disney does have a master plan. I am a believer in that. Some people, especially people that are more like inside types, like they know the inner workings of Disney, it's all very unpredictable. There's so much shakeup in management. It's a lot more on the fly than you would think, right? So a lot of those sorts of people think there really is no master plan. It's all, just hoping stuff comes together. But if you look at things like what they're doing in Epcot right now, like right now they're redoing the pavement in the entrance, and they redid part of the pavement under Spaceship Earth. It's a different type of pavement than what's formerly been in Epcot. It's a lot like the pavement that you have in the hub in the Magic Kingdom, where it has some grit to it, whatever material they actually put in the cement, the rocks or whatever, so you have better traction. The concrete is more of a tan color, and now in the newly unveiled overhauled entrance promenade to the Guardians coaster, you're seeing it over there as well. So just little things like that, you can already tell Disney has a master plan for the park. Like, this is what they're going to do with all the pathways, all the cement, literally like what you're walking on in the park. So to act as though Disney doesn't have any sort of idea as to what they want to do with these far out pavilion ideas, like what they're going to do with Test Track in the future or the Imagination Pavilion, is silly. I definitely think that someone at Disney has some sort of idea of what they want to do, what they want to see happen here. But the fact of the matter is that there's no Imagineers, there's no team, there's no budget, there's no green light, anything like that for the Imagination Pavilion right now, according to my inside sources. Right now, the last thing, the thing that's the farthest out that has a project team working on it, is the Mary Poppins attraction that will be coming to the UK Pavilion, the Mary Poppins themed area, excuse me. There's technically going to be an attraction back there, but that's a story for another day. Now, the other thing I want to talk about as far as the master plan goes, you know, Epic Universe, the next park that's coming to Universal Orlando, they're getting ready to start doing work on it, and a lot of people are very, very excited about that. So a lot of people are wondering, what is Disney going to do? Are they going to make another park? What is their plan? And it really does seem like after 2021, it really is a large gray area. I'm sure Disney has ideas of things they want to do, but there's nothing actionable. There's nothing concrete. There's nothing that there's teams actively working on. And that's what I want to articulate to you today, is the fact that you have this sort of bureaucracy within the Walt Disney Company. You know, for a long time, the way it seemed to work is you would have Imagineering and you'd have the executives, right? So Imagineering would say, hey, can we do this? And, you know, the executives, they say, yeah, go ahead. Here's your budget here. And, you know, and then the Imagineers would have to, you know, work inside that budget and kind of, you know, move things around to try to make as much of that vision come to life as they could with the money they were allotted from the executives for different projects. Now, in more recent times, it's a lot more complicated than this, because what you need to understand is Imagineering has ideas of things they want to do, and parks shop around for things they want. So the parks themselves have their own vice presidents that have a say in what comes to their park, what they want to do with their money. So there's a lot, it's very complicated, right? It's not just like the executives or Imagineering says, we want to put XYZ here. You also have the VPs of the parks that have a say in what comes to their parks. You have the managers inside the park, which have a say of what comes to their parks, to their areas, to their lands. There's a lot to this. And then of course you have consumer products, which has a say. And then you have park operations, which has a say. And oftentimes, you know, the Imagineering ideas don't really jive with what park operations thinks is the best for crowds and things like that. So there's all these different departments, all these different mini companies within the company that are all having a say on what projects get green lit and how things actually end up coming to fruition. So that's really why I was saying a lot of people that have inside knowledge don't really believe in the master plan, you know, like there's some master plan of everything to do, because they know there's all these interpersonal dynamics between individual people in the company and different organizations within the company that really makes any sort of long-term plan not very feasible with all the corporate shakeup and all the changes in management. You know, Iger's planning on retiring next year. Supposedly, you know, he also said he was going to retire in 2016 and, you know, a bunch of other years as well between now and then. So we'll see if it actually happens. But right now, it does look like there's not much planned after 2021. So what is the deal with the Imagination Pavilion? Now, I think the Imagination Pavilion is something that hopefully is going to be an awesome project. The fact of the matter is that the Imagination Pavilion is in desperate need of an updated attraction, or an entirely new attraction is something that you should keep in mind. Right now, Journey into Imagination with Figment is not living up to expectations. It's had a lot of technical difficulties and like maintenance things where they haven't like fixed projectors in months. Very bizarre stuff there. It has not had a lot of upkeep, and I think this signals that Disney does not long-term see maintaining the current attraction and they want to do something new with it. Now, I would predict that perhaps the reason that we haven't seen anything happen to the Imagination Pavilion yet, as far as the ride is concerned, is because maybe the long-term master plan is they want to do a new ride system with Journey into Imagination. Because if you think about it, a trackless system would fit very well in the Imagination Pavilion, both from a storytelling aspect with Figment and also from a physical aspect of having that trackless system and having a lot more freedom of movement than the attraction currently provides. The current ride track, which is very much, you know, it is what it is, right? So I do think there's a possibility that that's why we haven't seen it in phase one, because they could have just reskinned the attraction, right? They could have put back in Dreamfinder, or something we've heard for a long time is maybe the Imagination Pavilion is going to get Inside Out. There's going to be an Inside Out ride, and maybe they shoehorn in Figment somehow. If they were going to keep the current ride system and do something like that, they could be doing it right now. Look what they did with Frozen Ever After, right? They took Maelstrom and then they redesigned the scenes in the attraction. They could be doing that with the Imagination Pavilion right now. I don't think it would be hard to get the budget to do that if they were going to keep the current ride system. But if you want to do something with the ride system, if you want to do something really elaborate, if you want to do something that lives up to that level of respect that the Imagineers and a lot of people at Disney have for Figment and Dreamfinder and even Inside Out, if that's what they end up doing with it, whatever the case may be with the properties perhaps coming to the pavilion, the fact of the matter is I think they want to do a big attraction. They don't want it to be this, quick little, redesign and that's it. And I think that's why it's not in phase 1, but rather in a future phase of the Epcot overhaul project. Probably looking at a 2024 opening was my guess. I do think that is a possibility, especially if they do a new ride system. That'll likely be what we see happen there. So that's the basics of what's going on with the Imagination Pavilion right now. There's a lot of, interdepartmental stuff and just the fact that right now there's no team working on it or anything like that. To my knowledge, just yet. It seems like right now they're focused on Mary Poppins and everything that is preceding that, coming before it. And then I think hopefully soon we see Imagineers get assigned to new projects, because there are a lot of Imagineers and not a lot of projects right now, which definitely, understandably, I think has a lot of people in Imagineering concerns. So hopefully we see a lot of those projects green lit and we start to see teams working on stuff with the Imagination Pavilion, because I really do, the model confirms, the Epcot overhaul model confirms we're seeing something new come to the Imagination Pavilion. I guarantee you that is going to be a new attraction. And also, just based on how beloved Figment is, both inside the company and outside the company, I really don't see Figment leaving at all at this point. Like, I'm completely off that even being a possibility. I really believe Figment will be staying in the Imagination Pavilion long term. I think he might be getting a whole new ride. There is a question of, are they going to try to work in another intellectual property to get an attendance spike? Like the idea was, what if you did an inside out attraction? So you're inside of Riley's head, but inside of Riley's head, sort of like what they're doing with Guardians of the Galaxy, where Star-Lord visited Epcot as a kid. What if Riley had visited Epcot? So Figment is in her imagination. Figment is in her mind, right? So he's actually part of the attraction. That might be the story route they go down, or much more preferably, make an Epcot original attraction where you have Figment and you have Dreamfinder. Make an attraction about those two, and I don't think that that's completely impossible. I think it would be hard to get the budget and the approval and everything like that, but I really don't think it's impossible. Look at something like what Disney did with Mystic Manor out in Hong Kong Disneyland, which is an original attraction with original characters, with a trackless ride system, which would likely be the same system used for a new Imagination Pavilion attraction. So if you put that all together, that would be amazing. That would be the dream. I think that would be amazing, and honestly, I really think consumer products would be on board with that, because Figment plush sells. Figment merchandise sells. Figment is a big character and a big IP as far as Epcot is concerned. So giving him a home attraction that's dedicated to him and perhaps Dreamfinder, I do think would not only be profitable for Disney, but would also draw in crowds. And the other thing you have to consider is perhaps they get a bigger attendance spike if they did an Inside Out based attraction and Figment happens to be, in Riley's head. The thing that you have to consider though is long term, what is going to bring people back to the parks? Is it going to be a movie they recognize, or is it going to be stuff that they went to Disney and they discovered, right? Look at all the classic attractions in the Magic Kingdom, the Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean. These are things that bring people back to the parks. The thing that draws people in that first time is, oh, I saw that movie, I want to go experience that ride. But then they actually get to Disney and it's all the stuff that they didn't expect that I really think leaves the most of an impression on them. And then they want to go experience that again and again and again. Because when it's not something where you can just immerse yourself in it because it's a movie and you actually have to physically go to Disney to experience it, something like the Haunted Mansion, I really do think that does bring a lot of value to Disney in a different way than an IP attraction does. Maybe it's not the same attendance spike, maybe it doesn't draw in as many new guests, but doing something like that every now and again that appeals to the fan, to the repeat visitors. Those are the people that per capita spend the most at Walt Disney World by far. So making stuff for that crowd is definitely something that is not only good, but really what keeps the Disney parks alive long term. And then the question really becomes, do the current executives care about that long-term future of the Disney parks to actually fund and want to do things like that? Definitely lots to consider there. Thank you so much for the support, Cliff. Our second question this week comes from the Mouse and More Adam, who asks, when is the Space 220 restaurant opening? I know they're still working on interior construction. Now, the Space Restaurant project has been one of the weirdest that we've seen at Walt Disney World in a long time as far as projects go. It is very bizarre because, we can't see the inside. We don't have a lot of insiders that know much about the project. There are some people out there, I think even some viewers of the show, that know people that are working on the Space Restaurant. But what's interesting about it is normally with the restaurant, it's just a matter of building the restaurant and then you have the restaurant, right? But with this, they've been building the restaurant, but it's been kind of slow. There was some very weird delay from like the fall to the end of last year, where it really seemed like work had slowed down a lot. It seemed like it didn't come together nearly as fast as Disney expected, and I almost wonder if that has something to do with the space windows effect and then perfecting that, or some other holdup. You know, there's going to be a space elevator simulator, which is going to be awesome, that actually transports you up to the restaurant. So there might have been some issue there where they had to, you know, kind of pause work and focus on one specific thing, and then once that specific thing was worked out, then they could get back to putting everything together, and that's perhaps what created that little bubble in time where not much happened, because originally this restaurant was supposed to open winter 2019, and we still have nothing from Disney on when the restaurant is going to open. Now, the reason this is all coming to a head right now is because what happened was the head chef for the restaurant actually left. And he got recruited for something in Las Vegas, I believe. So we actually saw a lot of job listings go up for the Space 220 restaurant, not just for the head chef, but also, you know, different positions for people that are going to be running the restaurant. And in the job applications for that, you know, it has to give them a time frame of when they're going to be working, right? And the job listing said that it's aiming for a February opening in Walt Disney World. So that is when we're expecting this restaurant to open. Sometime this next month is when the space restaurant is expected to open. And a lot of people have said they want it to open on 2/20/2020 because it is the Space 220 restaurant. So to have it open on 2/20 would be really cool, and perhaps they can soft open it before then. Another date going around was like February 13th or something like that. A lot of people are talking about maybe it'll open then. And this also goes back to what we were talking about last question about the bureaucracy and all the different departments. This is a very weird restaurant because Imagineering is doing a lot of work on it, but Disney is not running the restaurant. Patina Restaurant Group is the one that is going to be in charge of the restaurant, its operations, you know, making money for it, all of that. Disney is not directly involved in the restaurant itself beyond the creative aspect. And it's a little bit scary because there was something similar to this when they redid Planet Hollywood in Disney Springs. You know, they had some help from Disney. You know, it's a different company that actually runs the restaurant, and in all the concept art, the inside of it, you're gonna have this amazing starry sky. You know, it's like the astronomer's tower. It will look super cool. And then when we actually got it, the projections on the inside looked terrible. They were really, really bad. They did not live up to the concept art. They still don't really live up to the concept art. It did not pan out anything like what it looked like in the concept art in the inside there. So it was a little bit of a disappointing thing there. It seems to be that like making content, like video content, projection content for restaurants is something that ends up being kind of difficult, more difficult than they expect. So looking at the space restaurant, we're gonna have the space windows. That's a big part of it. And I think Imagineering is definitely doing a good job there. So I'm not too worried about that. And given how awesome the space windows effect is on the Rise of the Resistance, where it looks so good and the perspective changes as you walk around, that's what it's going to be like inside the space restaurant from what we know. It's not going to be like a TV screen up against the wall that you're looking at. Like, it's going to be like you're going to be physically looking out a glass window, and then there's going to be this giant projection screen wrap around. So as you walk through the restaurant, you know, there's going to be perception distortion. There's going to be parallax, meaning that it's really going to feel like you're in space and you're going to be looking out into space, and based on where you are, it's actually going to be changing how it looks. It is going to be amazing. It is going to be a surreal experience, and I'm very excited for the Space 220 restaurant. So Adam, I would say February, this next month, for when the Space 220 restaurant will open. In fact, they just put out walls over by where you're actually going to enter the restaurant from Mission Space. They just expanded the walls, so I believe they can install the signage. I might head over to the Epcot, see if I can get some footage of that and everything else going on in the park very soon. So stay tuned for that. I'll let you know what's going on there. But February for the Space 220 restaurant, I believe, is when we're going to get it. Great question, Adam. Our third question this week comes from Gotham Family 4, who asks, when do you think the Guardians ride will open next year? We are coming back May 2021. Now, it's kind of crazy today how all these questions are kind of aligning with each other. It's sort of a thing where you think of a ride, you know, and it gets built, and that's the ride, right? So when does an attraction typically open? When it gets built, right? But because of what we're talking about today with all the bureaucracy and all the different departments, this attraction is one of the most complicated that we've seen in a long time, because it is a story coaster attraction, meaning the roller coaster is going to have a story, and it's 100% relying on projection screens. Now, they started working on the physical construction of the Guardians coaster back in 2017. And sure, they've had a lot of construction to do. They've had to completely redo the inside of the Universe of Energy building with different floors, like all the steel that they've had to put together. It has been a lot of work to get the inside together, and there's still a lot of work to go as far as the construction of the queue and the load area is concerned. But we know that the ride track itself has been assembled, and we also know that projection screens have been assembled inside of the building because we got permits of those last year. So a lot of that's already been installed, and we know that. So you're like, okay, the ride's coming together, the queue's coming together, the screens are coming together. Bring this to the beginning of 2020. Why is it going to take a whole nother year for us to get this attraction Disney's been working on since 2017? And the answer is content. You see, because one of the drawbacks of relying 100% on projections instead of practical scenes that, the Imagineers can put together and actually paint and do artistic stuff with, when it comes to projection screens, you actually have to make the video content, the CGI, the VFX, all that. You have to make that for those projection screens. And you have to get all the celebrities together. I mean, an attraction inside the world of Guardians, that's a lot of work, right? You have to get all those celebrities together. You have to get all the sets together. And they're going to do it, we've heard this for a long time, that they're likely going to film all the content for this attraction as part of the production of the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie, which is supposed to start production this summer. Meaning that as of right now, I do believe none of the content that is going to be in the attraction, all the screens you're going to be looking at, all your surroundings, none of that has been made yet at all because production has not started on the Guardians 3. In fact, I do think this spring perhaps is when we'll actually see them film all the content for this, and then this summer is when they actually make the movie itself. It'll be interesting to see what happens there, but that's something that you might not consider. It's something that very rarely happens, where for once it's not waiting for the attraction to be built or the scenes to be made. Instead, we are waiting for, video to be made, like basically like movie clips to be made, which is something really interesting to think about. And just to consider, they're gonna have to film all the Guardians characters doing all their actions and all their lines for the attraction. And we know it's Guardians of the Galaxy, which has a lot of CGI, a lot of really cool visuals to it. So once they film everything, all the footage they need of all the actors, of all the characters, then they actually have to go through and make all the visual effects. So there's probably gonna be a bunch of different visual effects studios working on this if they want to do it in a timely manner. It's gonna take months and months and months. The VFX supervisors are likely gonna have to be on site, like riding the Guardians coaster over and over again to get the timing right of how all the effects work. There's a lot of stuff as far as having a projection screen coaster work. There's a lot that goes into that, from recording the content to actually making the CGI and then meshing it all together into one amazing experience where you have the physical aspect as well as the visual aspect. Because think about it, a movie, you just have the visual aspect. This you're actually going to be moving, which adds another level of complexity just to making the content alone that is going to be on the screens, not to mention everything else Disney is working on with the attraction. From the exterior, which they still have a lot to do on, I do believe they're going to put the solar panels back, and they're going to paint the whole outside of it and do all sorts of different stuff with that. They still have to make the whole front facade. Right now in front of the pavilion, it's just cut open right now so that vehicles can get in and out for construction. But once they actually start to build the facade and, get all the drywall in there and, get the load area ready, it's going to finally all come together. And when is that going to be? That is a question that is being asked here by Gotham Family. And my concern is, even though this is a Q&A episode, it's hard to answer that because for the same reason I can't answer it, Disney can't answer it. There are so many variables. All Disney's been able to say is it'll be done in 2021. Now, if you're asking me when do I think Disney is going to be ready to open this attraction, when are they targeting? I would guess likely spring break season or summer. I would guess, you said that you're coming back May 2021. I guess around then is when the Guardians coaster will open. I do think they'll be able to get the CGI done fairly well, all the visuals for the attraction in a pretty timely manner, and actually get the attraction together. The question is, does Disney want it open in time for the spring break crowds in early 2021? Because I do think it is possible we see it open in that time frame. But if you consider that we're having this new ride system where the ride cars are rotating, they'll have to do a lot of testing with that. All the content and CGI work that we were just talking about that I've been mentioning, putting all that together, I do think we're looking more towards a summer opening here, but it really could be any time in 2021 just based on how successful they are with that new ride system, which Vekoma has been testing for a long time, so that things are looking good there, how fast they finish construction, they seem well on their way, and how fast they do the content itself, which does seem to be the major variable here. Imagine building something and having to wait to film a movie, right? Film Guardians 3. 3 before you can open a coaster. Pretty crazy to think about. Let me know what you guys think about all that. Great question. Thank you so much, Gotham Family 4. Our fourth and final question this week comes from Brandon, who asks, I saw a Disney-produced video that included Joe Rohde designing a beautiful Russia Pavilion for the World Showcase in Epcot. I know tensions are high between the USA and Russia, but what better way to bridge a better understanding between our culture and theirs than a spectacular pavilion in Epcot? Do you think, given the research and development already put forth, that the Russian pavilion has a chance of ever coming to fruition? Yes, Brandon, I also too recently saw that video. It's been making the rounds around the Disney community. I'll actually link it below and also put some clips here as I am talking about it. This Russia Pavilion. So in the 90s, Disney had this idea where they were going to do a Russian pavilion, and it looked awesome. It had this big courtyard area. It had this really cool attraction. Well, it's like sort of like a show. And this gets to the core of the idea, which is since before Epcot opened, there have been two things that Imagineers have wanted to do with the World Showcase that still have yet to happen. One of them is having a Carousel of Progress-like show in the World Showcase. There was going to be Winds of Change in the Japan Pavilion, which is going to be exactly that, like the Carousel of Progress. The building for the attraction was built. It's still back there at the Japan Pavilion, but it never ended up happening. It never panned out. That was one where you were going to have a stage. You were going to have different scenes about the history and culture of Japan, and you would actually be in your seat and be rotating around it like you do with the Carousel of Progress. And then later, this same concept was adapted into this Russia Pavilion idea in the early 90s, where it was going to be this massive theater. So instead of you rotating around the stage itself would be rotating and showing different scenes to you about the history of Russia. And it looks so awesome. The concept art is so beautiful. Now, the other thing that Imagineers always want to do that still hasn't happened, and they've been wanting to do since before Epcot even opened back in 1982, is put something over by where the Russia Pavilion was planned to go, which is where the Outpost currently is in the World Showcase. Originally, that was supposed to be the Equatorial Africa Pavilion, which is supposed to be huge. It's supposed to be the size of like the UK Pavilion or even bigger. And looking at the Russia Pavilion, which is going to go on that same plot of land, that plan, it's huge. It's a huge area. You'd have this giant plaza where Disney could have all sorts of food booths and all sorts of atmosphere entertainment, which would be so awesome. Then, of course, you'd have restaurants, you'd have Russian food, and then you would have this huge show with this awesome theater, and you would have this awesome rotating stage with all these different scenes and animatronics, a lot like the American Adventure in that way. It would have been so awesome, and I really wish we would have gotten this, but we did not. And the reason we didn't get the Russia Pavilion, it wasn't just something political. It's the same reason that we never see any new countries come to the World Showcase, and that is because of money. You know, the thing with the countries you see around the World Showcase is either the government paid for it, Disney paid for it, or a sponsor paid for it, a single corporate sponsor. Look at the Japan Pavilion. Mitsukoshi, the department store in Japan, they pay for the Japan Pavilion, and they have a store there and everything like that. They actually bankrolled the creation of the pavilion itself. You look at something like the American Adventure, in that case, Disney paid for it. If you look at the Morocco Pavilion, in that case, Morocco, the government of Morocco paid for it. So you have all sorts of different pavilions that have all sorts of different structures as far as how they were built and how they were funded. And in more recent times, we know this, the executives see all the space that you have in the parks more valuable as stuff to promote their own content, you know, to do their own stuff than just loaning it off to someone else. Essentially meaning the reason we haven't seen sponsors in Epcot, you know, in the Future World or anything else, it likely is just the fact that they don't look for sponsors anymore because they would rather use that real estate to, you know, to promote their movies, to sell their merchandise, to get people to come to the park by putting in their own IP, all sorts of things like that. And the most recent country, the most recent rumored country was Brazil, leading up to the D23 Expo last year, and we did not get an announcement. It fell through. It did not happen. And in the case of Brazil, what I believe happened was the government originally was going to fund a Brazil pavilion. We saw concept art way back in the day in the early 2010s for what this pavilion would look like. And it does seem that whatever deal they had with the Brazilian government, it fell through. The Brazilian government is not funding a pavilion like that any longer. So now it's been something where Disney would have to pay for it. And as I talked about, you have the VPs of the parks, you know, you have Bob Chapek, you have Bob Iger, you have the Imagineers, you have Bob Weiss, the president of Imagineering, you have all these different people involved in the decision-making process for these different things. You have park ops, you have consumer products. some element of the decision-making process just decided, this Brazil Pavilion thing is not panning out, at least not in time for the D23 Expo. But if you look at the model in the Epcot experience, you have the Coco guitar on Mexico, and I do think it's possible that Coco replaces the 3 Caballeros in Mexico. And where would the 3 Caballeros go? The 3 Caballeros meet and greet, it's so popular, the property is very popular in the parks. Where would the 3 Caballeros go? They could go over to a Brazil Pavilion hosted by Jose, who is from Brazil. Right? So you could have a Brazil Pavilion, you could have an IP tie-in, you could sell plush with them, you'd have a merchandising angle. From a park ops perspective, it's another pavilion to eat up guests. They can have a Brazilian steakhouse, which is something that park ops and Disney has wanted to do for a long time. The idea of a Brazilian steakhouse in the World Showcase is something that Disney surveyed guests about a lot in the past, and there's definitely a lot of guest interest for it. So all these sort of things coinciding, it does seem like there's still a possibility we do get the Brazil Pavilion if Disney is willing to pony up the cash for such a thing. Whatever the case may be, whether it's Russia, whether it's Brazil, whether it's Spain, whether it's Israel, at some point we are going to get a country in the World Showcase, a new country. It is simply a matter of time. There's too much space around the World Showcase. The World Showcase is way too valuable as far as the land is concerned, as far as how much money and revenue it generates. There is no way that all those lots of land will continue to stay empty. We will get new countries in the World Showcase. It's just a matter of who is going to sign off on it and actually let it happen. And I really hope we see it happen soon. So that's the situation. As far as the research and development with the Russia Pavilion that you were asking about, Brandon, yes. For sure, the fact that they did all that research and development does mean that it is possible that some of those ideas that you saw in that video, with the rotating stage and the animatronics and the layout of that pavilion, that some of that does end up coming to fruition at some point in the future, because there's so many Imagineering ideas that don't end up panning out, that end up panning out later. If an Imagineering idea does not get approved, it goes in the filing cabinet and it comes back to life in a different form, or perhaps in the same form. But I do believe with current geopolitical stuff, I do think it is unlikely that we see a Russia Pavilion, because I don't think that Disney would pay for it themselves. There's not really a direct IP to put in the Russia Pavilion. Let me know if you guys have any ideas, and I really don't see the Russian government paying for it. Those two things combined really do mean that we're likely not going to see the Russia Pavilion happen. Brazil, though, I do think is something Disney would be willing to pay for if they could see a return on investment with something like the 3 Caballeros and then bring Coco over to Mexico, which is what I want to see happen. Let me know what you guys think about that. Thanks so much for all the support, Brandon. If I did not answer your question on this week's show, you can re-enter it again in the comments below to re-enter the lottery, or you can ask a new question, or if you don't care about your question being answered in the show, you can DM me on Instagram at MickeyViews, follow our account over there, or of course you can also tweet at me at MickeyViews, and I'm always doing stuff on Twitter and Instagram showing you what I'm up to as far as being in the parks and all sorts of things like that as I get all my videos done, do all the MickeyViews business, so you can check there for the latest updates. Please leave a bunch of questions in the comments below, because last week we didn't really have very many, and I like to have a lot of questions to choose from so we can have a really, really good show here, but definitely a lot of fun this week. Be sure to leave your Disney questions in the comments below and answer them right here on the show. When Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opened, the counter service location in the land, Docking Bay 7 Food and Cargo, had some awesome spork utensils with some really nice quality metal. They were nice and heavy and really efficient as far as a way to eat, because you have the spoon and the fork going together to eat all sorts of out of this world food that they serve in that dining venue. But of course, since we can't have nice things, some people decided to start stealing them to resell on the internet or keep for themselves at home, resulting in sporks running out at the locations in both Disneyland and Walt Disney World in just a few weeks. I think they ran out in a few days in the case of Disneyland. It was crazy. Now I'm happy to announce the sporks have returned, this time for a price, where now for $10.99 you can order a spork with your meal and bring it home with you, legally this time. Definitely something very cool to see. And this time around, Disney actually gives you a cool bag to go along with the spork, which funny enough when translated reads property of Docking Bay 7 Food and Cargo. Perhaps a little inside joke, a little nod at the spork situation from Disney there. Now currently they are only being sold in Disneyland at Disneyland's Docking Bay 7 Food and Cargo location, but fingers crossed they're on their way here to Walt Disney World as well, because I want one of these so badly to actually take home and use, because they are really, really cool. All right, it's poll time. Last week we asked, how will Disney open the Runaway Railway? It looks like the majority of you say with a virtual queue. It'll be interesting to see. The president of Walt Disney World posted on Instagram last week some photos of cast members actually inside now working working on the attraction and doing all their training, and now test and adjusting is underway on the attraction, where the cast members that run the ride actually sit in the cars and see how it works, basically simulate being guests. So when it comes to opening day, the ride is ready to go. This is a general practice Disney does with all the attractions. Lots of people think the Runaway Railway is still going to have a physical queue because there's a standby as well as a fast pass sign above the entrance. But it should also be noted there are standby and fast pass signs for the Rise of the Resistance too, and we've seen what's happened there. So really it all comes down to how reliably is the ride operating in the test that cast members are doing right now. If it's having very little downtime and all the technical stuff is worked out with the new trackless ride system, a physical queue I think is definitely likely. If it's having to do resets and those sorts of things, like what's happened with Rise of Resistance, which we do believe uses the exact same ride communication method, and there's a lot of the same roadblocks because on the Runaway Railway there is a simulator section, we might see the same situation where it does have a virtual queue, but we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks so much to everyone who voted this week. Based off of the questions we answered, when will the Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind coaster open? A, early 2021, B, spring 2021, C, summer 2021, or D, fall 2021 or later. To vote, be sure watching from the YouTube mobile app or YouTube.com on your computer. You should see a little info symbol right here. Just click there, make your vote. Your voice has been heard, and we'll read the results next week. That's all the latest talk in the world of Disney this week. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the latest Disney news and discussion right here as we continue to cover everything going on in Walt Disney World, and there definitely is a lot going on. We're building a pop vinyl collection on this shelf, episode by episode, this week in honor of the Millenium Falcon Smugglers Run attraction getting Fast Pass at Walt Disney World starting on February 19th. That's when it actually has Fast Passes available. I got one for the first day, so I'll be there to cover it for you guys. We'll see exactly how that works. Today we have Hondo Ohnaka of Ohnaka Transport Solutions, of course, from the attraction. They actually sell this in the park, I believe. I got this in Disney Springs. Pretty awesome. Wow. That's all for this episode of the Magic Weekly. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Braden. Have a magical day. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of the Magic Weekly. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, a lot of fun to record. I really like talking about the bureaucracy stuff, the corporate structure, all the dynamics behind everything that we see happen, because it's really what determines the news. We often like to talk about Disney like it's this single organism. Disney did this today. Disney is thinking about doing this today. But really, when we say Disney, we're talking about many companies inside of a company, many different departments inside of a department, many different people, decision makers inside the company, and everything that we see happen, all the stuff that we actually see come out of Disney, stuff they announce, projects we see, things we get to experience. It went through all those different departments. It went through all these different variations and all these different ideas and all these different debates and disagreements and everything. So there's really a lot behind it, and it's definitely something I enjoy talking about because it really does determine what we end up seeing as far as the news go, which is pretty crazy. A lot of people have been saying they really enjoy this post-show thing. I really just do it, just something extra so you can see what I'm thinking about for the people that watch to the end, because I am really, really grateful for you guys. You are what make this possible. And I guess what I'd like to talk about today is just, what I'm thinking about right now is everything going on in China with the coronavirus, this viral strain that's going around that's really, really bad, because we actually have some viewers that are in Wuhan, China, which is one of the quarantined cities right now. And, they have to be locked inside. You do not want to go outside because, it might be in the air, it might be on surfaces you touch, things like that. So there's sort of like a cabin fever thing going on with viewers out there. So, giving them some content like this, a little bit of extra stuff, I think definitely does go a long way and hopefully makes their day better. So shout out to everyone out there dealing with that. I really hope it does, blow over and doesn't get too much worse than it already has out there. And hopefully it doesn't get here because, the thing is, Hong Kong Disneyland is closed. Shanghai Disney is closed indefinitely because of this virus. You start to think, there's been some confirmed cases here in America, but you wonder if it becomes more widespread, like in cities freeze here in America, like what happens then, right? You know, what does Disney do as far as the parks go? Because there's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot of different things to consider there. One thing I threw out on Twitter talking about it, you know, I was talking about like, you know, Disney should probably stock up on masks and things like that, but that's really like the end game, right? Like at the point where Disney would require you to wear a mask to the park, they probably just close the park, right? So I don't think that's something that we'd really have to speculate too much about, but I did point out about the hand sanitizer thing, you know, because like things like alcohol-based hand sanitizer, like stations around the park, Disney constantly telling people to wash their hands in the park, that's probably a good idea in a time like this. The interesting thing is we had the Zika virus a few years ago, and Disney had a very good reaction to that, where they actually filled in some of the pools that were river country at the time, so there won't be as many mosquitoes. Disney did a lot of preventative measures, so something like this, I do think that Disney will have some sort of reaction to make sure the guests are safe, and maybe just have a little extra preventative measure there with telling people more, you know, to wash their hands, don't touch your face, you know, wash your hands before you eat, things like that. I do think that's a very good preventative measure as far as surface contact goes, so you don't get the virus that way. So I do think that would be a good call there. I mean, obviously, if it becomes widespread, then at that point, you know, Disney would probably close the parks, but hopefully it will not get to that point, because that would be really, really bad. I really don't think it will, but I definitely am prepared. And hey, that's what this studio's for, right? You know, hermetically sealed studio. You know, I could just talk all day and just live in here and just stream to you guys 24/7 for weeks, right? So we could speculate endlessly about everything going on with Disney, right? So no, but seriously, I really hope everyone is doing all right and this blows over, because that would not be good if it continues to spread. But definitely be prepared, and I'll keep bringing this content to you guys no matter what. Don't worry about me. I will be here. I'm very excited to continue bringing you guys this content. I'm so glad you guys are enjoying the Magic Weekly. So thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. That's a wrap. Woo!